Welcome back to the Double Swing, and it's the spring or summer or autumn. How do we split up this season? Who gives a crap? It's the second season of the year, and we're starting off with a preview of the Esports World Cup with a special guest. It's Hawka, here to make some picks and share his takes. I'm sure you have a lot to critique us on, but let's just take a look back to the end of last season where we had our final episode. It was Blast Spring Finals. It wasn't great for me. I'm going to be honest, my underdog pick of VP was the only one who gave me any points. Whilst on the other side of things, Yumi, you did manage to get the victory. Spirit, you picked them. They went all the way. 2 points for you, 2 points for the viewers as well, who made the same picks. But unfortunately, you still have a bit of a gap to make up. 21 points to my 24, with the viewers in the lead of 29, because we know the comment section, Reddit, HTV, you guys are the real geniuses. We're the frauds, but keep watching. It's all in good fun. Let's get straight into it. Hawka, you're our guest, and you have the first pick. How you doing, and who have you taken?
I'm doing well, and I mean, at first I was like worried about the first pick because coming back off of the off season, you're always just kind of lost as to who's actually going to be good and bad. Like some teams seem to come in not that prepared at all. Some teams seem to be pretty prepared. But I went with Spirit, and I actually like it more and more as I think about it, because even at the end of last season, Spirit didn't actually play that much Counter-Strike. They had a big period of time off. So I'm really hoping they actually have been able to put that time into the off season and maybe prepare a little bit sooner than some of the other teams. And also it helps that, of course, they just won Blast right at the end of the season. So that's also good. And in that final, Zontix actually was playing pretty well on the stage for once. So that looks like it's turning around. That's nice. And then Donk, I think probably best player in the world. It's him or m0NESY. You know, big toss up there, but he's doing it on the rifle, which definitely helps. So yeah, I don't think there's really any flaws in this team. It feels like kind of a boring pick almost. It feels like a very safe pick, but I think they just have the lowest flaw out of all the teams here. Like, I actually believe a team like Vitality could come into this and just be a bit off. Whereas with Spirit, I just think there's always a solid base level of team play and just skill where I know they'll at least do pretty well. So that's my thought process there.
Yeah, it's kind of the slam dunk. I think it has been pretty much the go-to all year. Like, the hype's been there, and then they won Katowice, and from that point onwards, the floodgates opened. All things considered, though, a little bit disappointing that they didn't rack up too many trophies, but I guess that is the consequence of being a fairly young team, new to the stage, also not really grown into themselves just yet, but we saw at that last event what I described as like the version of Spirit that can actually be consistent. It's not Donk 1.7 rating and everyone's just kind of like jogging in his dust going, I'm part of the team too, lads. Like, no, it was a team effort with Shiro clutching, Zontix getting multis, intentionally aiming for the chest, allegedly, but that's not a topic for this conversation. It's positive, it's good vibes. Chopper called an amazing games in some of their series, literally outcalling other IGLs. I think they have the formula to win. Hopefully, for your sakes, they haven't taken this summer break as too much of a break. You know, they haven't come into this rusty, because if they're cold, you never know, they could get upset. That opening match, it is against MIBR. They're not a team who are that tactically deep historically, but they are talented. So that's the only concern I'd have, that they might not go direct to playoffs. Thankfully, this format is very forgiving. If you don't win that opening BO3, you go to a completely chaotic BO1 bracket, where anything can happen. So maybe with their talent, they'll muddle through, but I'm just a little concerned their opening matchup, if they are rusty, can catch them out.
Yeah, I think my concern is maybe if I mean, I don't know that I personally believe this, but, you know, coming into the start of this year, they were a team that had a lot to prove and were able to do so at one of the first events of the year. And for them, I think the biggest thing is sort of remaining focused as a team that are considered the best team in the world. They just finished the last tournament at the end of the season. They might be a bit more liberal with their break versus, you know, at the start of the year where they're probably reducing time off and grinding as many scrims as possible. I think the players are young enough and hungry enough that shouldn't be a problem. But I could also see a world where, you know, they feel as though they would have done enough, so to speak, at the start of this year, that they could justify taking some extra steps away. So that's maybe my one concern about this Spirit team, because I do believe that they house the second best player in the world in Donk.
Ooh.
And they have an in-game leader that's actually kind of proven over his tenure and his time within the Russian scene that he calls a good enough game. Like, he can simplify and they can play very sporadic and very loose, but as they've played higher and higher tier tournaments, they've actually added layers of tactical depth. They've not played that same simple Counter-Strike that I think they did in Katowice as kind of their hallmark, so that people were comfortable. I think they have added those layers now so that they can find consistency, which I think is really good to see. And your point on Zontix, like, it's just nice that he's not crumbling anymore.
Yeah. You know, that was the one thing that was worrying for me was they had that big break in tournaments in last season, and I was worried that some of the young players were going to start to feel pressure when it came back to actually being on the stage again, because everyone was kind of saying they're maybe the best team in the world, but there was like a month or two where it felt like they didn't play anything. So everyone's just sitting there waiting, and you're like, oh, okay. I think was it Pro League that they weren't
at? Called
yeah.
the Pro League.
Yeah. So not ideal. But the other thing I will also add is at Dallas, they played Dust 2 and they got destroyed by Vitality. Vitality kept going for the crazy CT aggression, and Spirit got owned by it. But then at the Blast at the end of the season, they actually went ahead and won Dust 2 like 4 times. They beat everyone they played on it. And it feels like a map that should be good for them as well. Chopper, I think, pretty like you said, not some crazy tactical in-game leader necessarily. And Dust 2, just the skill they have on this team with having a great AWP on Shiro. That was the other thing. Shiro was so much more consistent at the Blast Spring Final as well. So yeah, everything pointing upwards basically for Spirit right now. Looks good. I think Dust 2 coming in might actually end up helping them, which is nice for them.
Yeah, you'd expect it to, but you're right. It didn't initially look that way, but they seem to have found their groove, and they're still going to be really dangerous coming in here. Yumi, yourself, you've taken another big favorite. I did feel like as the guy with the third pick, I was getting kind of screwed over on the favorite list. Like, there's a couple big names going straight away.
Yeah, I went straight for the other young kids on the block that are very, very compelling in MOUZ Sports, or MOUZ, as we're going to call them these days. I don't think there's much that I can really elaborate on for this MOUZ team. I'm really drawn to them because of the fact they've got like players that can continue to grow under this banner, and they can just play some. Honestly, they play a lot of heroic-esque Counter-Strike with pieces that can be far more independent than I think those heroic members did when heroic were at the top. Like, that to me is what draws me to MOUZ. They are not scared of aggression. They find the right times to do it. And I really do believe that Xerxin is probably the most consistent of the Israeli talents we have in the space right now. So I think they've selected the right players to have linked up and sort of reformed that academy team. And I don't know, I just like watching them play. Like, I always feel like there's an interesting round that's happening when I'm watching MOUZ play, mainly on CT, but then they have some crazy T-side rounds too.
Yeah, I think it's just a very solid team all the way through. I think Jimpat is just so good, right? Jimpat is like such a cheat code for me to have a player of his output in his positions. It's actually crazy because I don't know if you'd say MOUZ have one really standout player. Kind of, I guess, you know, coming back to what you were saying about them being somewhat heroic-esque almost. Like they're not a team that has like a donk or some crazy standout player, and it feels like all the other top teams kind of have to have that. And so it's nice to see a team doing it a little more by committee. I do think sometimes I'm always not sure about Shuhei's fragging, because I feel like he shouldn't be as bad of a fragger as he is. I don't know. Maybe his stats aren't as bad as I'm thinking, but from what I see from him, I just remember picking him in fantasy all the time, and he'd always do so badly for me. And I was like, why? You're not that bad of a player. Like, you should be all right. But outside of that, yeah, just very solid. Torji is maybe the weakest point, just because you want a really top AWPer to win the top events. And Torji's a good AWPer, but probably not a great AWPer. And that's a very important position to have. But outside of that, no real qualms. Brolan is actually fitting surprisingly well. What a turnaround for him. And yeah, I don't know if there's much more to it. I agree on Exertion. I don't know if I see him as consistent as you, maybe. I feel like just inherently his role is like quite inconsistent because he's so aggressive. Mm-hmm. So I would maybe say someone like a Flames is maybe a bit more consistent than him. But I think Exertion just generally hits a higher level. It's just, you know, a bigger range of what that level can be.
Yeah, to me, it is probably Nerds is the closest contest in terms of like
Fair.
consistent output, but I also think Nerds doesn't get as much impact. So
Sure.
that's where I always draw the line in terms of like the numbers versus the in-game philosophy.
Right. I do think, just to preface why I consider this one of the big favorite teams, some people are going to look at their Dallas result and be misled. They're going to think, "What? How is this team the big informed side?" They took their break for some weird reason between tournaments just before Dallas. They took their foot off the pedal, was how I described it in other shows. That they just decided, you know what? We're going to get burned out if we play this one extra tournament at max prep with everything running as it has been. And that's the one they took off, despite not playing in Blast, which frustrated me, because I'm like, you could have just won Dallas, or at least been a top 4, top 2 contender at Dallas, and then taken that break. You could take all the breaks you want at that point. Like, go fly off to the beach somewhere. I don't care, but you had one last event to nail. And so I think that's going to mislead people into thinking this team kind of fell off. No, they didn't. They chose to take a break. I think they're going to be back at 100%, and I think you're both correct. Like, Xerxan is actually consistent, not necessarily... Obviously, as being an entry fragger, he's not going to have the perfect 1+, 0+ like rating record, but he's going to have crazy impact in every series because of the way he plays. And there's never a map where you feel like he truly misfires entirely. Since they've been able to find their form on the stages, he hasn't had those big drop-offs. He's been consistently finding openings, and that's been really important. But the other part of that, YIMFAT is, you're right, a cheat code. When you say there's no standout player, relative to positions, there is. YIMFAT is nuts for the roles he plays. And I saw this even in the academy days, that he was going to have this next level, like, polish and cerebral approach to his game that you don't expect from a kid. And he really is that guy. He is so proper, does everything right, and rarely puts a foot wrong, which, for again, he's still like 17 or 18. He's still a child. He's this good and this clutch, this composed. Yeah, MOUZ aren't just a problem now. They're going to be a problem for years and years to come.
I think as well, it's important to preface, like, when we're talking about Dallas and the spring finals, we have to also bring up the fact that Vertigo underwent like a massive change before both those events, and it was basically a map that wasn't played at either of them. I think it was like one time at Dallas, and it was, I think, MOUZ Complexity in the group stage, like a best of one or something. I think I'm not trying to discredit these tournaments, but it is weird to have a map that is just completely voided from the map pool entirely. Like, nobody wanted to pick it. No one, even the teams that were bad at Vertigo, teams didn't want to counterpick a Vertigo thinking like, oh, this is how we get our advantage. It just never saw play. So it's something to draw as a caveat, because it's part of the reason I think G2 did so well at Dallas, is that they floated Vertigo and nobody wanted to pick it against them. I think it covers some of the teams that have maybe had struggles in their map pool, because there's a Dust 2 that everyone kind of knows how to play, and then Vertigo, the dynamic just shifted so drastically. But I imagine during the player break, and actually sort of immediately after Dallas, MOUZ would have been working on Vertigo, because it's a map that they quite enjoyed. How they liked Overpass a fair amount as well, so it's a weird position that they found themselves in at the end of the season, I think.
Yeah, not necessarily losing one of their key maps, but realistically, one of their key maps being such an unknown was the problem. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Although I think coming forward, the Vertigo, hopefully they do continue to favor it and other teams allow it, I think, through a little more, because it just became one of the most interesting maps in the pool. Like, in the way it got changed and the way the avenues for rotations have like shifted, it's already more fresh and more interesting than Dust 2 was. So I can't wait to see more of that, and hopefully they can bring it back with a bang. Now, myself, maybe I could have taken another team here, but I think this roster, they also had a little bit of a fall off towards the end of the season. That also, I think, might have been misinterpreted. I've taken FaZe Clan, and even though their last 2 events, it seems like, it slowly got worse, they did have the most hectic schedule of everyone, and they made the deepest runs consistently of anyone as well. So I think this has been the one team that needed the break the most. They didn't need to make roster changes. They didn't need to address big issues. They just needed rest and to come back. Just a little bit of pep in their step, a little bit of freshness, just a reset. And I think they're going to be more dangerous now than they were at the last couple of tournaments at the end of last year. struggle to see them as heavy favorites like I do MOUZ and Spirit, but I think they're the team that are next in line. They have the most loaded roster of the big veteran teams. They have the best IGL probably of almost anyone. And sure, it looks sketch, but I definitely think that was mental fatigue more than just them not being skilled enough, them not being out of touch. It was a lot of hours played, a lot of travel, and FaZe going to be back to the top. They still have, in my opinion, like the best rifle duo in Rops and Frozen who can both open and close things. They very diverse skill sets on both of them, and they can really adapt to the modern game better than anyone else. So I've got FaZe Clan as my first favorite. And yes, I have said it before, I'll say it again. Not everyone else is going to believe in them in the way I am. And other people would have taken a say of Vitality, but I do think they've got that veteran nous, and coming off their break, they'll be lethal.
Okay. The problem I have is that I just don't think Carrigan gets out of bed for the Esports World Cup. I don't think he's caring that much. I don't know if the team as a whole is caring that much about this event. Rain as well, you know. Does he care that much about the bloody Esports World Cup?
It's the World Cup. How could you not care? It's got such a prestigious title.
It's true. It does. No, but yeah, that's the only thing I'd be scared of, because I think coming into the Blast groups, I'm pretty sure they lost their opening game against Gamer Legion randomly, and you're just like, okay, well, that's clearly just you not being 100% ready off the player break. The other thing I think that FaZe are kind of dealing with is, I don't know if we're just having a fall off of lurkers in general, or if Rops is just not playing as well for what reason, but I've noticed both Rops and Spinks, just pure numbers wise, are doing way worse than they were in previous years. And even impact wise, I don't really see them having the same impact. So I look at Rops as, meant to be the best player on this team. I don't think he has been that. I guess now we have to say Frozen is the guy you go to, maybe just because the meta is shifting towards more aggressive players. I don't even know. But Frozen can kind of do both. And I think Frozen's good, but when Rops was at his peak, it just gives you so much more than I think Frozen has been able to give as the best player on the team. So that's maybe one of the caveats I would have. And then also Rain is solid, but I don't think he's anything special until you get onto stage games normally. So yeah, the problem is FaZe's strengths for me lie in Carrigan on the big stage making great calls, and I don't know. We'll see if they get to that point, or if the pressure is felt for any teams at this event.
Yeah, a 1-round best of 3 into the playoffs, or a hell best of 1 lower bracket thing that happens if you lose your opening game is a pretty cursed format that I don't know that anyone's going to be too enthused about as it plays out. But you can't say you didn't earn your way to the playoffs, surely. I guess.
Surely they beat FlyQuest, right?
It's a FlyQuest BO3. Remember, if it's an opening BO1, I get your concern. I mean, that Game Legion game, I think it's equal parts Game Legion prep and their own shortcomings coming out of that break. But it's a FlyQuest BO3. Even if they are a bit slow to start on map 1, you've got to take them winning that one. That's pretty difficult to see them losing. Yeah,
no, I do believe in what you're saying. The FaZe guys were going to every event and making deep runs. I do think they needed the break. I have been saying for a while that I want to see the Rops we saw at the end of 2023 coming back and playing more aggressive like he was. He was taking independent fights and basically going in for isolated entry frags and winning them a lot of the time. And I don't know, maybe he was just wide swing abusing. I don't know, but I need that confidence in Rops's wheelhouse again, because I feel Frozen can do it, but he's doing it usually when the pack is behind him, if they're going to rely on him to open up a bomb site or open up a pathway. Whereas Rops was just, I don't know, he was just a whole different level of control while the rest of the squad are doing something else. So that's what I want to see to come back for FaZe. I don't think they're a bad pick at all.
Yeah, and the one part I left hanging but decided not to hit just until now, Brokey has been maybe third, fourth best sulfur in the world this year. He's actually been far better than he has been in the past, and in terms of impact, delivered a lot more than he has in prior years, where Brokey's oftentimes, he started off on FaZe not really an AWPer. And slowly he's developed, and I think we're seeing the start of his AWPing peak this season. I think he's approaching 1.2 rating. I mean, he's better than guys who are on other top teams who can win tournaments, like your Torjis and like your Wonderfuls. I think he has been a step above those guys this year. And that's something we can see, like, delivering consistently across events is Brokey showing up on his AWP. So I did leave that dangling. I didn't think, neither one of you bit on it, but Brokey has been that good. And I think it's also something we forget to factor in almost. We're always so obsessed with, like, the argument of, like, who's better, Frozen or Robs? How do their rifle roles exactly match up? How do we want Robs to play his roles? Brokey's just fragging. So I think that's something we need to remember, that they still have an AWP impact and an AWP presence that not every team can match.
I think he's probably, unfortunately, the one player you'd replace if you could get m0NESY, for example. But that's a lot of teams for their AWP position. So
yeah, and if you could get Donk, you'd cut half the roster immediately.
yeah.
Sure. For the best player in the world, you'd get the best player in the world.
It's like Rain is gone if Donk's available, Brokey's gone if m0NESY's available. So
my god, imagine that lineup.
Oh fuck.
Oh,
yeah.
No. Doesn't bear just thinking about, like, Outstrike is dead. It's over. We know who's won every event. But all right, we still got more favorites to pick. This event fairly stacked, even if it is strangely formatted. So Hawka, who have you gone as your second favorite pick?
Mate, I can't believe this was quite a late pick. None of you guys wanted the Vitality, which I'm interested about. I got Vitality in there quite late on in the selections. I was happy about that because, listen, I don't know if this team is I don't want to use the word flawed, but like it feels like I've just been banging on about the whole thing where Apex is playing all these really important CT positions and it's just so confusing. He's playing like Connector or Mirage and I'm like, mate, look at the players on your team. Do you not want someone else playing there? But then in general on CT side, they're going for this weird, like, it almost feels like high risk, high variance, really active and aggressive CT sides, almost not letting teams set up. And that can either go very well or very badly, it seems. But I still think, even though their style was a bit weird, just the players they have are so strong. You've got ZywOo, okay, don't need to really talk about him because everyone knows how good he is. But then I think Spinks has probably been a bit better than Rops so far this year, I would say. I think he's been like okay. And then Flames on T side is so valuable to this team. The entries he can get, the aggressive plays he can make. I think on CT side, he's nowhere near as good, but just giving that ability to really do well on T side makes a big difference. And the other thing I liked at Blast is I felt like Mezzy was, even at Dallas, just like a little more active in the way he was playing some of the more anchor positions. I think in the past, he was playing them almost like he wasn't ready to be at this level. He almost looked like scared sometimes. He would kind of not actively make plays. He'd try and just not make mistakes. But I actually saw him making some more aggressive moves or switching up the way he played Pit or just things like that really excited me because I think we all know that Mezzy is a really talented guy and a really hardworking guy. So I think it was nice seeing his step up. And I think that could actually be a decent difference maker if he can continue to deliver that level. So yeah, overall, I can't believe I got Vitality. I'm chuffed. I want to know why you guys didn't take him.
To be honest, Vitality were very tantalizing because I do believe that they are probably going to undergo some role or position swaps. Because I actually just don't think it makes sense that Flames is in like very static positions on CT sides when they like you said, they do like to go for active plays, but it's very typically sort of channeled through Apex, ZywOo, and maybe they'll throw in Mezzy there, but Flames is so infrequently involved that I imagine they'll try and make that work somehow. And to be honest, it's the Apex angle of things that I'm a little bit. It's harder for me to pick Vitality when I'm not sure that Apex is like in the right headspace to lead this team at the moment.
He's had a break, mate. He's had a break. He'll be fine.
It just watching them at Blast, it was like he was just losing his mind over the weirdest things, and almost it looked like he was looking for someone to blame a lot for why he was dying or why the rounds were lost. And sometimes it was him that was the one that made the mistake. Like if you took a third party view on it, it looked like he was the one making a mistake. So that's why I think I hesitate to pick Vitality, because I just don't know if there are moves that they want to make or maybe can't at the moment. And a little bit turbulence maybe internally with this team. But I do think individually the players are up to snuff. Like if Vitality won this tournament or the first couple of tournaments in this season, it wouldn't surprise me. But it's also a team that I could see bombing out of these events just based on like their approach or I guess the vibe behind the scenes of this team at the moment.
For me, the standard is where we have the real conversation with Vitality. Because yes, I agree they can bomb out, but they'll bomb out once they make playoffs. They'll bomb out just by being disappointing in a semi-final, or disappointing in a quarter-final when they get the wrong matchup. And oh my god, who'd have thunk it? It got difficult and Spinks and ZywOo kind of went missing. Like, ZywOo's missing his 1.25, but at the end of the day, they kind of need a really great ZywOo to win events. They don't typically get that deep of a performance. We'd like to big up Mezzy when he has his bigger maps, or in some cases big series, but quite often you do need a massive ZywOo for it to actually happen on the server. Spinks directly, I think, is responsible for the biggest fall off in group stage to playoff rating out of any player in this last season. He has been atrocious, and a lot of their big deep runs have come off the back of FlameZ actually finding that impact, which is why I think it is interesting that we don't see him playing more dynamically. Because when it's the big stage, and when you need your impact players to deliver impact, despite not truly being in those spots, FlameZ has done it time and time again. So I think there's a problem of, trust in the roster. That if they have figured it out over the course of this break, great. If they haven't, we're still going to have the same issues of them not putting their faith in FlameZ to be able to deliver them wins, still treating him like he's the fifth, like historically, as the guy who's just kind of there to take up certain roles, not be relied on, and kind of get cut eventually. Like that's been the old way of treating fifths. Here, we really need him to be embraced as really a star, because in the stage games, they don't have another one. It's ZywOo. It's not really Spinks. It needs to be him that they actually put their faith in and let him deliver them some wins. That's why I personally didn't pick them. I've just seen too many disappointing playoff series where players who are supposed to be their superstars haven't looked like it.
Fair. I also am very confused as to what Xtaz is like doing. Just because, like, if I was looking at this team, I'd be like, mate, Apex, like we gotta switch up these positions, my man. I don't know if it's Apex that wants to play here or what, but at least if you put the faith in Flames in those positions, you'll get to see whether you can trust him or not. And then maybe he does really badly for whatever reason, and you could make a change. But right now, it kind of feels like that there wouldn't even be an obvious change to make on this team, even though they didn't win anything in the first season. And they got so close so many times. They would, like you said, semi-finals, finals, just didn't win anything, which is what Vitality should be expecting. So, yeah, that is the interesting one. And then also, like you said, Apex, I don't know, like just his personality in general, it's always been like, could you really be that good of a stable in-game leader? Really? It's always felt strange, and like, yeah, I'm happy they've done well in the past, and I think when it's working, it probably helps the team, and everyone's like, oh, Apex, funny guy over there, you know, good mood, and then suddenly it can just snap and change so quick, and then I don't know if that is really that helpful. So yeah, that is a big one.
I think the good thing for them is that, you know, at the end of last year, that they looked pretty good, even though they had like some roster signings, and you know they're able to make that work with Mezzy quite quickly. And I think I remember some of the interviews like, oh, well, trying to work on my attitude. And, you know, I think the vibes were a lot more positive. But now that they come into this year and they're getting close and then they're losing and it's, you know, they're not winning trophies. Now it's like, this is the real time to express how much you're working on the atmosphere behind the scenes. Because it can lead to some pretty unhealthy breakups, I think, if you have situations where you feel as though you're going to be blamed, even if it feels like the right play to make at a time, like you might hesitate for that extra moment that could potentially win you a game sometimes. So, you know, you don't want to create a situation where people are scared of being yelled at or you know, they're almost victimized.
Are you okay? This sounds very personal to you.
I you know, just from my own experience playing in like even amateur level Counter-Strike. Like if there's somebody that is
will do it to you, right?
If there's somebody that will blame you, it can be a moment where you hesitate. And I can imagine that at the level that they're playing at, that only gets amplified more because they already have the internal pressure of like, if I fuck this up, we might just lose the game. So
yeah, it just sounded like a Glassdoor like message really, rather than anything else. But I accept your premise. It is probably very correct. So I have seen a lot of like, I love going to stage like events with a stage where I can see every player cam always, because it's true at Blast finals, Apex is dying and then immediately doing this. Like he's looking at someone next to him, and I'm like, dude, you're an idiot. You fucked it up. Like I'm watching the screen. You fucked up. And I think
No, go ahead.
Oh, because I think the other part of this whole Apex roles debate was very well, and I'm going to steal this point straight from Kassad. Like he articulated it very well when he's talking about roles. There's the other aspect we're forgetting of like instinct, of what you're comfortable doing and what you need to do. And I think if Apex, not being historically known for being a cerebral player, is calling out of spots he feels comfortable using, you know, the info that he is used to receiving, the way he's supposed to be playing, the way he's supposed to be moving, I think it might throw him off his calling game as well as his fragging if he has to go and play like FlameZ spots instead of the ones he likes, like Connector or Mirage. Having to force himself to be static when he's used to being quite a dynamic player as well as personality, that could be just a limiting factor that might have to be addressed in future if it continues to be a stick in the mud.
I would just to tack onto this. When I was doing the desk at Blast, they just have us standing in front of the teams, and like I'm pretty sure at one point I brought up Apex's, you know, mental whatever, and whether they'd had a mental collapse, and he's just there in the background making these little signals like, oh, he's chatting again, and I was like, it's so awkward, like being there, like, well, you know, sorry Apex, that's just how I feel about it. But yeah, a lot of fun, Apex.
Yeah, all right, Yumi. Your second favorite. Who have you taken?
I feel like I've angled for an underdog, weirdly, as a favorite. But, you know, fine. I'm going with Virtus Pro. I think they've put in a shift during this player break. I don't think they have been breaking. They got a new coach they couldn't compete with when it really came towards the end of the season. So they'll be Jane will be working with him. They'll be wanting to integrate Electronic properly and have him actually not feel as though he's doing a mirror impression at times. I think this team is going to be a very different look to what we saw last season. You know, they have fully acknowledged that the James Dastan preservative style may not be the most conducive to winning, especially with the pieces that they have now. I think that comes through, and I believe Zoma is actually going to offer quite a lot in terms of changing the philosophy of how Virtus Pro Counter-Strike looks coming into this season, and I think they've got the firepower to make it really work. So this is a spitball, or I guess I'm throwing this piece of mud at the wall, and I'm hoping that it sticks, because I hope Virtus Pro can figure it out, because I think this team should be good. Like I just like so many of the players on it and the way that they operate. I struggled to not pick Virtus Pro, actually, kind of historically.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it, but you've gone crawling back to your abusive ex again. Like,
yeah.
The number of times you've picked Virtus Pro, and I understand why you want to pick them again here. And I essentially made the case for the Zoma signing to magically fix them on our show when I picked them like straight after it, and it was hilarious, but ultimately misguided. What matters is that I can kind of see where you're coming from, because I made the exact same arguments. I made the same like passionate plea that like, believe in this team. They have made the right coaching change. The philosophy will be more adapted towards Electronic strengths, and they will be able to find a way. And then we get an interview where Electronic's talking about being the IGL, or James talking about Electronic becoming IGL, and I'm like, fuck, we've gone nowhere. This might just be Cloud9 2.0, and it's intensely disappointing.
I believe the quote is, like, we'll do anything we need to succeed, whether that means Electronic becomes the in-game leader or something. Like, I don't care. Like, we'll find something that works. I don't think it's him being like, I don't want an in-game lead. Electronic,
no,
you do it.
That
like,
exactly, but it's the fact that he's opening that door is just disappointing, to say the least. And I don't think they have the roster to play an Electronic-led system, so that'll be curious for me. I agree. There's reasons to be positive about this team, but I'm just saying, when I saw that interview, that headline, immediately had that sinking feeling. I've seen this so many times with teams. They're going to screw it up.
I do feel like bringing Electronic in alongside Jame, I'm just like, mate, that can't work. I just can't imagine Jame calling a more proactive or faster, sort of brand of Counter-Strike. And the annoying thing is, they throw in some faster plays now, they do. And when they do, they're actually pretty damn good. And Electronic actually looks really good in those sorts of positions. But then you just go back to this really reactive play style again, which I still think I see too much from them personally. And yeah, the Jame and Electronic sort of clash of styles, where I think Electronic is going to have ideas and want to be aggressive, and I'm just like, Jame, he's so entrenched. He's been so entrenched for so long in that way of playing, and I don't think it was working. I think Jame as an AWPer hasn't even been that good. If you want to talk about AWPers that like have adapted well, Jame I think has been like pretty average, whereas I don't know if it's because Brokey is just more willing to sort of be the battle sniper that he's actually done really well, whereas Jame just I don't, not only do I not see the impact, but his stats aren't even that good, so I'm a bit like, okay, I don't actually know what you're providing here. And yeah, look, they've got talented riflers, but I just feel like Electronic's going to start coming in with some ideas, and James just going to be like, oh, okay, well, I don't know what to do. Hopefully they can play more proactively, but I don't know. I don't know if I see it.
God, I'm trying to describe this in a way that makes sense. I feel like James creates an environment where he's effectively like a king crossing the countryside, and he needs his guards to carve a path. Like, that's when James, I think, does his best AWPing, especially on T sides. I remember this period when Norbert was really sort of flourishing in CS2. Every time James wanted to go to a spot, Norbert would hard swing into a position, like literally right off spawn, and James would be right behind him. So he'd either trade or immediately move into another fight so he can link up with his mid control guy on Ancient. Those are the positions where I think James shows off his mechanics the best, because he is lightning quick when it comes to like the immediate snap trade, or sometimes even in clutches he can be really, really strong. But I think his stats don't look so good because he does save a lot, and he does play very safe very often. I actually disagree that they don't play fast Counter-Strike, because I think when Norbert was having those highs, they were actually playing a lot of fast Counter-Strike, because they're just leveraging the fact that he's playing sick right now. Let's just do this thing. But their start of rounds are very quick, and then they hesitate for like a minute and then finish a round off. Sure. I think they're a very explosive team in that nature. So I just hope that they found a mesh that works after this player break is all. I am defending the abusive X.
Well, it's a mix of things. I think Zoma here is the new therapist. Like, he's got to try and make it work. Like, he's adapting a couple things, and he's also got to bring in a bunch of fresh ideas. And just to clarify a bit, like, the reason I did initially make the point that Zomo could be a good coach for this roster was the fact that his Nine Pandas team lived and died off Dealerdes, an aggressive, proactive rifler who wants to be in all the fights. If he could apply some of that philosophy here, I thought we could get off to just a flying start, and they'd be one of the more successful teams. Maybe they just needed time to figure it out, because it's not that simple, realistically. Maybe I was a little ambitious when I first got into it. Maybe they do need more time, and this is when we see that upgraded version. Now, myself, I've decided I'm going for a team where I'm pretty much the abuser, because I usually talk a lot of crap about this roster, and rarely do I want to pick them. But NAVI were one of the few options on the board when I got to picking my second favorite that actually had title ambition and title aspirations realistically within their 5 players, because it was pretty much them, G2 or Cole. And anyone who follows my channel knows I've had strong opinions about G2's latest signings. But let's focus back on NAVI, who again I've called a fraud. I've declared many of their stars to be impotent and not capable of really carrying them anywhere. But I do have certain good things to say about them. So I'm going to say them now, and then we can pretend that I only picked one favorite and I'll get double points because holy crap, do I not think they're going to do particularly well. Na'Vi. At least they have JL, who has been this year a top 15 player. I have had some Twitter spats with randoms, or Twitter spats. I said something, they responded, I let someone else argue with them. But Twitter spats with people who are claiming JL's like this elite rifler. He's not, but he's really, really good. And that's been a key part of their success. When they've had deep runs, JL has pulled miracles out of his ass. Like the major being the biggest example, that was like Darren Brown. That was just an endless string of magic tricks and things appearing where they shouldn't have been and headshots landing when it seemed impossible. That was JL at that major. He's been a lesser version of that at most events, and when he's not even close to it, they don't really go deep. But when he's on his game at least 80, 90%, they can really make an impact. So he's been impactful. And then between the fits and spurts of Imma and Bit on the other rifle positions, they have the capability to beat pretty much anyone. So take into consideration the fact that they still consistently will always have, probably, except when they're facing a couple teams, the best IGL on the server. They have the best coach, like in terms of informing their system, prepping a team. They have arguably the best tier 1 coach IGL combo. Yeah, when I see them facing up against Furia in an opening BO3, a Furia with a new roster, and at worst comes to worst, they have to win some BO1s against, for example, GGAO to try and make it through the other side of it, I feel confident they'll make the playoffs. Whether they'll go deep, well, we'll see what kind of form JL's on. I mean, if his girlfriend's been giving him loads of little love notes in his lunch, maybe he'll absolutely dominate. If she's been giving him the cold shoulder, they'll probably go out straight away. But hopefully in either case, we see the best version of Na'Vi possible, because when they're on it, it is kind of a pleasure to see them like outcall people, out-rotate, and sometimes, when the players are up to it, outplay. But that's my Na'Vi spiel. I'm sure there's many more opinions to be had. I didn't really feel that great picking them. It's just the others were worse.
Damn, so really Navi's success is just tied to JL's fiancé.
Yep. Oh, is it fiancé now? Am I...
Fiancé, girlfriend, partner, let's go with that.
Yeah, that is the solo determining factor. If they break up, it could go one of two ways. You know, he could be one of those guys who like immediately goes into a pit and then Na'Vi are dead.
Or it's all grind.
Or it's grind set, you know, he's looking at cringy memes all day, he's talking to himself in the mirror, and he goes bananas. But either way, it'll be a disaster.
Yeah, I think Na'Vi are a weird team where like the potential ceiling of this team is actually so high. But I think we've just seen so much wavering from those players throughout this Alexi B international mesh of players that it's hard to see it happen. Like JL did have a life tournament at the Copenhagen Major. Like he is never going. I don't think he is ever going to play to that standard ever again. Maybe in his whole career, because it was outlandish and totally unreasonable what he was doing at that tournament. I think he personally single-handedly delivered that major to them. But I struggle to see. I want them to make a roster move for Imma, because he's so vocal and he's apparently offering up a lot, like strategically and making calls for people and all that stuff, and that's great. But why do you have two in-game leaders on the team then? And ones that I think Alexi B has better consistency numbers wise as an actual in-game leader than Imma does as the secondary caller. So that's my gripe with this roster, or I guess the team as it stands right now. Even if Imma and JL are like emotional support leaders or something, I want actual leaders and actual star players.
Yeah. Listen, people have been trying to say like he's been getting better lately, guys. Like, and it's like, yeah, okay, but he was terrible, and now he's just bad. Like that's where I'm at with it. That's not enough of an improvement for me in the positions he's in. He's just not good enough. And the other problem with that is Bit is, as a rifler, also I think kind of inherently inconsistent just with how he plays. So you kind of need a solid rifler alongside JL on the team, because I do think Bit can be. I think he's fine on this team, but he's kind of like that third player you kind of want to just step up, when he can, because he doesn't even get a lot of the best spots now. Like CT side, I actually think Alexi might have better positions than him, which is kind of wild to say. It's similar. It's like like I know Alexi plays like Yard on Nuke and stuff, so he puts himself in some good positions.
It's the rotator IGL meta that kind of sprung up over the last year and a half, where you see like Snappy, Alexi B, and then it was all revealed like in dramatic fashion in the Nero tableaus. If you go diving into it, you see all these IGLs with expected ratings in like the 1.07, 1.10, and you're like, but y'all are garbage. We see this. Why are you playing these spots?
Alexi's CT side, he's 0.88 rating on CT side. I just looked like that. And listen, I love Alexi. I think he's a great caller, but he's has been like pretty fragging wise for a while. Yeah, I also think we haven't really touched on Wonderful. He's just like a good AWPer. Yeah. He's just good. I think that's all there is to say. There's not much of like a standout nature to him that you get with like JL randomly. But Wonderful's just, solid. I think that's all there is to it. The only thing I will quickly add is I have seen people have the idea that Na'Vi tend to do really well when Blade and Alexi get like a lot of prep time leading into a tournament. When they have like big breaks between events, they can seem to do better when they put all their emphasis into one thing. I think that's why people thought, at the major they could do a bit better. But when there are tournaments back to back, they don't have that same ability to properly prep because they are a very technical team. So if they have been putting in a bit of work in the player break, maybe that could help if they do come in. But big if, I suppose, big if.
Big. Yeah, I do need to, before we actually move on to any other topics, just shout out a friend of mine's piece of work, an opinion piece published on Dust2 Sweden. Don't worry, the idioms do slightly translate. Basically saying that other IGLs don't get anywhere near as much shit as HooXi does for being absolute bots. And despite, in a lot of cases, as we just discussed, having more favourable spots. So I think, Alexi B has been one of the ones highlighted in there. And I think the point of the article isn't so much to say, hey, shit on everyone else. It's more like maybe chill it a bit with the HooXi thing. If we are going to witness Alexi B do arguably the same thing.
Yeah, that's what screwed HooXi is his stats look really bad because he is taking like all the really bad spots. Like I genuinely think if HooXi gave himself a few better spots and his rating went up like a tiny bit, people would be like, oh, he's just like, he's just like the other IGLs. Like, don't get me wrong, he is a bad player. He probably is worse than Alexi, but like the gulf is not that big. Come on, guys.
Yeah, he does have mechanical disparities that cannot be denied when you watch him actually play the game.
Yeah.
Like, Alexi V has been known historically for great movement. Like, he's had, like, teams and, like, stretches of time where he has been a solid fragger. But no, the difference in stats, which is what most people use to make all of their judgments. Like, you see it, they just screenshot the numbers. There's not actually that big a change, and people should maybe get a bit more consistent with who they're sending death threats to. You know what I mean? Like, it's, like, if we're going to be toxic... do it right. Like
you're gonna send death threats. Oh man.
But if that wraps up our favourites takes, there is technically two favourites, but sorry, Cole. I don't give a shit. G2 need to be discussed because before we started recording, I did briefly bring this up, and I got two people telling me they don't think it's that bad a pick, and yet didn't pick G2. Why is it? Why do we not believe in Snacks all of a sudden? I thought I was the one who was, anti-Snacks, anti this move. You guys seem to have some more positive things to say than I did, so I want to hear some explanations, some rationalizations to why you didn't pick them.
I had Spirit of Vitality. Those are great you got
some, one guy did pick Virtus Pro, so I think we need to start there.
Listen, this is the only team that's made, like, dramatic roster moves that... any time that you see dramatic roster moves like this, even if I saw m0NESY join FaZe initially, I couldn't, and FaZe, let's say they didn't have like a good start to this year, I don't know that I could pick them in good confidence. Even if like m0NESY had a stellar start of the year and FaZe were a little bit shaky, like that to me still would be like, I could believe in it, like, independently, but I can't rationalize it based on the fact that I think these things need time to develop. For me, I think G2 are going to be a bit of a weird mesh of, like, the old way of playing and maybe what Snacks is comfortable with, and maybe Snacks is just going to be like, hey, guys, how do you like to play? Let's play. Yeah. Like, I don't know how it's all going to interact.
That's exactly how it's going to work. Hey, guys, how do you guys want to play? Like, let's do it together, friends.
I do just think that there is a real possibility. Like, everyone is so down on this Snacks move, and everyone's like, look at all the role positions and things like that. And a lot of those conversations wouldn't be available given the previous accessibility to those documents that show you where people play and what their spots are. I don't think Snax having conflicting spot positions on CT sides or T sides actually matters that much when they're already going to re-navigate the way that they play spots, because MOUZ is coming into the team and replacing a lot of, I imagine, what Huxie's aggression is. And Snax has literally changed his roles like 8 times on Gamer Legion because their roster was also very turbulent and he had to fill in positions very frequently. Yes, maybe he's not like a dedicated, I'm the best anchor player or the best rotator in the world, but he is good enough at all of those spots that I don't think it's going to be as bad as people make out. Like, people are so fixated on the roles. Like, Counter-Strike players haven't played the majority of roles in pugs or in other teams or throughout their entire careers. Like, if you are so untalented that you can literally only do one thing ever, you're not a pro player. Like, you actually will not be a pro player. So I just disagree fundamentally with the argument that this team can't work just because, I don't know, maybe Huxley was like a better in-game leader in certain areas. Like, he developed m0NESY and he did make G2 win a couple of trophies, and you know, happy for him in that regard. Helped them with Dallas, but he might be a better analyst than an actual in-game leader, because when G2 looked bad, they looked really bad. I think that was the problem I had with G2. Like, people will forget that because Dallas happened, and it happened without Huxley, and it's like, oh my god, they're winning with Stewie, this is crazy. But when they were really playing bad, even though m0NESY was one of the best players in the world, they looked like fundamentally like the structure around m0NESY. He was a child holding his big green while the house was on fire. I just needed something to change, and I think Snax will be fine, and I think he'll be very accommodating, and the vibes will be great behind the scenes.
The vibes. That's what you're not considering. The expected vibes from Snax.
That's true. The vibes.
Yeah. Okay. The thing I don't understand is everyone's been saying like Huxley needs to go, right? You bring in Snax. We can all admit, better fragger than Huxley. I don't actually know how much he's going to be better, actually, but we can agree. And we've already seen this team, G2, can just win tournaments with Stewie. Like, we've already seen it. Like, this team, they don't need some crazy, like, amazing in-game leader. And I also think that the Snax bad T side thing, I think, is so overblown because Gamer Legion played loads of Overpass, and they were actually, like, pretty good on the T side of Overpass compared to other teams, but it's a very CT-sided map. And then they barely play Anubis, and you can just, mate, if you just open up the stats of teams that play Anubis, of course their T side is way better. Like, Vitality, I think, have the highest T side round win percentage, probably in big part because they play a lot of Anubis. So listen, I'm not saying that Snax is like a great in-game leader, but everyone is basically having to assume that Snax is like terrible as an in-game leader to think this move is really, really bad. Like, you basically have to think Snax is a terrible IGL. Is that what people think? I'm confused.
It is what I think.
Mate, Gamer Legion like lived up to the expectations. No, that roster was not some crazy, amazing stacked roster. They did about what I'd expect them to do.
I think my only critique of the way this has happened is that if I was getting Snax, I would actually want Ash on at least support staff.
Okay.
Like, because I think Ash is a big part of the reason that Gamer Legion have been consistent. So, that to me is the one critique I'll have of this move, is that I'm not sure how much of that is just Ash and all the seeds he's planting, and Snax is just plucking the full potato out and being like, look, I did it. I don't know how much of that is the case, or if, you know, in the likes of Shui, for example, where, you know, you have the likes of Ash behind you, and Shui is still a good in-game leader, this, you know, separated from him. I'd like to see how well it develops. I think people are just they're far too critical right now, given we've seen nothing.
Mate, if I was on hot take point made, I think here's what I'd say to really piss people off. I think the Snax pickup is better than the MOUZ pickup in the way it's gonna work. Like, it's a better move. Because MOUZ is going to get screwed. You're going to make MOUZ anchor, and he's just going to be bad. Like, he's just going to be bad.
Yes, or are they? Or are the notoriously egotistical Kovac brothers, cousins, whatever, joined at the hip at this point, going to make concessions?
He literally already said on a podcast, on our interview with Darth Mike, he was like, "Yeah, I'm basically big site anchor now on every map." So Yeah.
We know they haven't made the concessions. And my point, actually, I can say this with a clear conscience. I do not think Snax is a good IGL. Like,
yeah, but he doesn't have to be like that good.
I've conceded that as well. But my point is then it's G2 for fuck's sake. Like they're supposed to be
but,
great. They're not supposed to be a decent, occasionally maybe win if we get lucky. Like they're supposed to be aiming to be a team that wins majors, that has an era. The fact that they've had Nico for 4 years approaching and haven't won a major in that time, despite, coming close with Nexa, says a lot. So yes, I do think he's a bad IGL. I do think actually Ash deserves so much credit, because watching their T-sides, the T-sides they win, like the rounds, are set executes out of spawn, pretty much. The rounds they lose are when they default and have to mid-round, and it all goes catastrophically wrong. So I do think there's a clear separation between what works and what doesn't work on this roster, and the problem has been Snax not being that great of an IGL. Like, he can make his own plays, he can do certain things that HooXi can't. There's no doubt about it. He's still kind of Snax. He's just not a great IGL in Tier 1.
I think why it can work on this team, though, is because you have, I assume, way more vocal players. And so I think they will be helping out a lot. Like, I look at Gamer Legion, and I genuinely think that is a team of inexperienced guys. I don't know if any of them are helping Snax, like, at all. I'm not going to lie. I have no idea. But I don't get the vibes. Unlikely. Yeah, I don't get the vibes that they are. Whereas, at least with G2, I imagine, like, Nico's just going to say, okay, I want to make this play. Monacy's going to say, okay, I want to make this play. And then, like, Snax just don't fuck up, That's all. That's all.
We'll see, because this will be an ultimate test, I think. Because if they could straight vibe it with Stewie, maybe they will just straight vibe this event and we'll look like Muppets for not having picked them at all. Like, no matter our opinions, maybe we should have taken the risk. But before we turn this video into another G2 video, because it does feel like a lot of my own content has been... I mean, no, it's partially my fault. I have strong opinions and for some reason refuse to let things go. That's probably why I have a channel making videos about this crap. But let's move on to underdogs, because there's some really difficult picks to make here and some interesting justifications that are going to need to be... pulled out of somewhere. So, underdog number 1, Hawka, who have you taken?
Who did I take? MIBR. Yeah. No, I remember. This was a good pick. Okay, I had, basically, in my head, it was the choice between MIBR and Furia. And just Furia, I just can't, man. I just can't. So I went with MIBR. I do think, honestly, this team is pretty decently skilled, which helps a lot. And they're probably hungry for this sort of tournament. Like, this is actually a big deal to them compared to Furia, who might just come in and half-arse it. So I went with MIBR. I think, obviously, Insani is the main guy where everyone's been excited for ages, him as a player. And he's just so fun to watch. Like, his aim is so snappy. He's so aggressive. There's a lot to like about Insani, and I think he's the main guy you're relying on if you want them to cause some upsets. But I honestly think Safe is, like, fine as an AWPer. I think Drop is fine in his positions, actually maybe even pretty good. Exit is, like, also the guy on the team where I'm like, yes, you are actually a good player also. So I think they've just got, like, a decent amount of talent, and yeah, I think they have enough of an X factor where I think they could cause some upsets. But I do think the underdog picks in general here are kind of pretty hard, because there's quite a few stacked teams in the favorite section. But I think they've just got that little bit about them, MIBR. Like, I feel like I haven't seen them get some upsets in a bit. This feels like the time.
To be honest, I was going to pick this team if you didn't. So yeah, I also would have picked MIBR, mainly just because... Sure, that they had a disappointment with the major, like them not making it to the major was actually a real big surprise, because there were other teams that made it through that were far less informed than MIBR themselves. And during the break, I guess after the major, they've still been looking just as compelling and just as good. And I think the good thing for this team is that the team feels complete. Like, the roles make sense for the players that they have. They never feel like they're doing anything too far outside of their comfort zone. Like you said, Exit as an in-game leader actually is, like, a good individual player as well. So there's it doesn't feel like they've got, like, a glaring weakness or like an issue that they need to resolve, so to speak.
I don't know, mate. BR Enizan, I don't know. Yeah.
I do think BR Enizan is the weakest player on this team, but I do think he is fulfilling his... I mean, I think he's doing what he's told. I don't necessarily think that's entire, because when he first came
I'd
into
tell him
this
to
team,
kill a few more people then. That's what I'd do.
because I think I did a watch party with Maui where we were watching MIBR, and I was like, yeah, I mean, or I might have even just brought it up. Like, BR Nazan is probably the weakest player on that team. I do acknowledge that, but I think he's playing his positions as he's told, and he's the one player I would replace. But I actually don't think he's terrible bad. Like, if we're comparing it to, I don't know, the flame that people were throwing at Skulls on Liquid or Kai on Furia, I wouldn't say it's an imperative cut they need to make, but it is an upgrade position potentially. That's sure, fine. I'll concede. There are upgrades you could get instead of BR Nazan, but I think he is a better player than his stats do make out. Because when he first joined the team, he was honestly actually just as exciting to watch as like anyone like Exit or what have you.
Yeah, initially the appeal for me of this team, like I'm talking this is like 18 months ago, was Insani and Brenau, or BR Nazan, as we've now decided to start bothering to call him, which is just a mouthful. He's been their problem player in every series they've lost at big events last year. And that's been the problem for me. He takes a lot of opening duels. He makes a lot of plays. Doesn't make them successfully, though. And that's been the issue. He's cost them a lot of rounds. He's been a negative impact player. Like, you see these series, they lose 2-1, close maps here and there. Insani playing Insan, and he's just not holding up his end of the bargain. Like, he's really just tanking their stats, and like, he's down below players like Drop, who are playing anchor spots, who are not getting any real initiative to go and make plays. He's taking a lot of opening fights, he's making plays, he's just not winning the fights. So you're 100% right. If he's doing what he's told, tell him to frag, because he's not actually finishing it off. That's been my biggest complaint, because this team should be winning domestically pretty much without fail, yet they'll always lose to a 9Z in a qualifier. They'll be able to, at a local land, lose something. They'll go to Jönköping and just not really impress. I mean, you can give them the leg up of, oh, you only lost complexity, like in the BO3s, but you still lost and went out in groups. CCT Global Finals, the same story. They went out by losing to BetBoom twice. These are the teams I'd want them to beat if I was going to be more excited, and I wish they weren't losing in the same way, with BR Nazan at the bottom when he really shouldn't be. He has no right to be. He has anchored them in a performance sense rather than any role. And that's been my biggest complaint. I agree, the talent's there. Exit, Insani, outstanding players who, if the Brazilian scene wasn't so messed up, would probably be in a better place in their careers. But as it stands, they're here. Hopefully they can make something happen. I'm just worried that the same thing's going to pop up again.
Furia is screaming out for a player like Insani. Like they should be trying so hard to get him.
But what did they do? They re-signed Yuri for 3 years.
I also, the other thing is, obviously, mate, in best of ones, like Insani can carry a best of one all day. So can Exit, really. So that's the other thing they've got going for them, because I'm not gonna lie, they'll probably lose against Spirit in their opening game, but I would not be surprised if they cause a little upset in the BO1s.
Yeah, we'll see how the matchups shake up, because it's not. You can't really see these sort of things like pre-lined up nicely in a lot of cases. I think there's going to be some situational changes. Maybe it's based on like clear, if some teams are favorites, some teams are underdogs, they'll get treated differently.
Maybe.
Which would be another debate to have about their format being completely busted later on. Because there's a lot of question marks to be, there's a lot of questions to have about this. So, unless we've got anything else to add on to MIBR, a team I don't think any of us follow that aggressively. YouM3, you have an underdog. Who have you taken?
I've gone for the other Brazilian team. I was like, if it's not MIBR, then I'm picking Furia, I guess. I actually don't think Skulls is as bad as people made out. I do think the problems with Furia were a little. Kai was just kind of a scapegoat, stopgap kind of player. I think. Like, I think anyone on the team actually believed that Kai was going to fit, and it was a little depressing to watch for the past few months. But I think bringing in a player like Skulls that actually has a bit more tenure and a bit more polish, and has been put into some not great positions when he was on Liquid. I do think that he can actually elevate this team quite substantially, because I think Cello is a weird player to me because he's strong in certain. I don't know. I've seen him really pop off in games before and then just go missing for like several months at a time. But I think they've got enough firepower on this team now with Skulls in, and hopefully Fallen isn't playing like a noob too. That the rifling core for me is actually very strong in my opinion.
Yeah, I think Cello for me is like, I think he's pretty good on T side actually, playing pretty aggressive. I feel like CT, I think he plays like a lot of anchor spots, and I don't know. I don't know about him in those positions. He seems to be better when he's more active to me anyway.
Yeah, well, that should be what's changed, no? With Skulls coming in.
Yeah,
Cello should be unlocked. That's been the case sold to me as the Furia might be okay now.
Ah, okay. Well, okay. The other thing with Skulls is like, is he not? Did he not actually get described as kind of like a Queserato regen? Like, was that not what he kind of was before Liquid? So I don't know how that's gonna work. Yeah, I also just don't think that Furia are gonna be like that up for this tournament. Like, it's another classic one where I'm like, I don't think they've been grinding in the off season. I don't get that vibe at all. Especially
they just
when
made a signing. Why
I know,
they?
but like, you know, Yuri and Queserato choosing to stay at Furia. Like, how hungry can you really be, guys? How hungry can you really be?
That is true.
Yeah, and also, listen, Fallen not that great as an AWPer. Just like, you just hope he's fine. I think weirdly in like their big games, sometimes he can actually do okay just based off experience. And then obviously the thing that's most frustrating, the worst thing in Counter-Strike is when you have a passive player who's really good on a dogshit team. Watching Queserato is so frustrating on this team, but I can't even. I don't even want to give the energy of being mad anymore because he's doing it to himself.
So over it, yeah.
Yeah, whatever.
No, I've heard some people try to make the case for this team, and I do think they should be grinding for this, but I have seen them. I've seen so many events where Furia have come in like limp dicks. They're just like not tried and just gone home. Most of the time, though, it's been like, oh, they've gotten an invite they didn't deserve to like CCT like online knockout stages, and then they just got bodied by 5 random Danish people. Like, that's happened quite a lot to them in their history. I think the fact that they're bringing in Skulls to just play hard anchor spots and just be better than Kai, I think will probably work. I think Skulls got what I kind of consider. I mean, Rainwaker had beyond the scope of just these problems, but the same problem of like, hey, this guy's a really good closer in tier 2. Why don't we bring him in to play on a team with NAV? Oh yeah, that's real fucking sick, genius. Especially one who doesn't understand all the comms because he's playing his second language for the first time. Why? So, thankfully, in this team, he's in his home language. You know, maybe if he is playing slightly uncomfortable spots, he's not allowed to just play Queserato spots. Funnily enough, you keep that guy as he is, where he is, fragging away. Maybe there's some success to be found. I think the Cello being more aggressive, like, idea is going to be an important factor because he has been in the past a pretty like impactful player on other teams. And on CT sides, it did feel like he was neutered on this roster. So hopefully that unlocks some more Cello power, I guess, and maybe we'll see them continue to grow. But yeah, it does feel like we just came out of a transitionary period where they were like, we need to make those cuts. We're going to bring in temporary players and figure it out later. Hopefully this is the part where they all agreed, we've now figured it out. We've got our roster. We grind again. But it is always hard to say. I think Furia is a very talented but streaky team. Like, even when they are good, they have been like up and down, streaky, really good for a period of time. Then it just doesn't really quite vibe. I hope they can make it work, but I don't know. I've not got much positive to say about them beyond that.
Also, I do wonder how much of the like independent playmaking that Yuri or Queserato will do in like late rounds or sometimes in mid rounds will actually still happen, or whether or not that will also change. Because, you know, this is the first time that they've separated from art in their careers, really. And going under new in-game leading, where, you know, they were fine being passive while art was just like hyper aggressive and doing like the wildest shit. For them, that might have been a good balance to have, but someone has to almost occupy that space that's left over from art. And yeah, Kai couldn't quite cut it. Hoping Cello can, maybe with some accompaniment, you know.
The only thing I will add is that I think Guerry was probably the worst coach in Counter-Strike based on watching this team play. Oh my god, like they would just miss smokes. They would do so much wrong. And now Guerry is gone. So I don't really know much about the new coach. Sidda? I don't even know.
I think the whole team almost felt like
the
they
name.
just got too comfortable, didn't they?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Apparently he was the former assistant coach of Furia. So I don't know. Basically, any change on the coaching front for me is a good thing because I don't think Guerry had the reins on this team whatsoever.
Oh, that's fair. Right. I have an underdog, and we love talking about him on this show. Me and YouM3, it's always a battle to see who gets to pick them, realistically. I've taken them. It's Mongolz. Whilst they have had a couple less than brilliant results in the last couple of days, in general, they came out at the end of last season winning back-to-back LANs, Mesa Nomadic and then Yala Campus. Not an S-tier LAN, shouldn't be considered on that level, but it's a very impressive victory for them, especially with the names they took down. Like, they were able to take down Stralis in a best of 3, they were able to beat NIP in a best of 3, and then they also got BO1 wins over a team like Heroic, which wasn't actually that great considering the roster they faced, but it was still important for them, because they've been a team who've been able to really dominate everyone who's tier 2 to like make entrances into like the Katowice main events, but then just struggle to get over the line. And the fact that they've started beating that sort of next step up of tier 1 team, like these NIPs, Astralises, who have lots of talented players, but who haven't quite found the right level of play at the next level, signifies to me that they are not a fraudulent top 15 team. Maybe they shouldn't be 11th, maybe 15th would be more realistic, but they're certainly a team that's worth taking seriously right now. They've got talent. They've started figuring out best ways to use them. I think Senzu was a bit wild when he first came on this team, but he has found some more consistency to his game. And the fact they've unlocked new levels out of players like Mazzinho, who's been really dangerous, and 910, quite importantly, who had an MVP caliber performance. I think that's amazing. Mongolz here, it's going to be difficult for them to actually make the deep run that we want them to make. They do start with a G2 game in a best of 3 that could be nuts. But given their talented players and given like how well drilled they've been by Mara and Blitz and how they've executed on their game plan in the past, I do think there's a good chance they even win that opening BO3 in an upset and make a surprising playoff appearance here. They're not a guaranteed thing. They never are, but they're always fun to watch.
Yeah, everyone wanted this underdog pick. This was like the only good underdog pick going, and you went straight in with it, which I respect. I can't believe you didn't talk about Blitz much, though, because I love
I've talked to him about him to death.
Okay,
that's the problem. Yeah. Every time we do the show, I have to talk about Blitz. And yes, he's an amazing fragger, IGL, man, chess player, lover, everything. But like...
literally, that's what I was literally about to list off pretty much exactly everything you said, including the lover part. Yeah, he's just, honestly, he's just like great. He's just great all round. Weirdly, this team, like, kind of has some parallels to like the Cadian-led Heroic to me, where I watch them play and they look so coordinated now and so cohesive, which I love. And then Blitz is also clearly like at the center of everything. Like even in the positions he plays, he's very, very much in those rotator positions, always putting himself in the thick of the action. And then, I think it's some of the other players that you always are basically looking at and saying, what level can you reach? Because 910 has been pretty up and down at times on this team. I still think he's probably a good enough AWPer on his day. And then, you do have Senzu, who's been playing great, and Techno's aim can be really snappy. I think he's still got another level he can get to, because the other thing is this team is so young. It's crazy how young this team is. But yeah, they clearly all have a lot of respect for Blitz, and he's been able to bring them up. I do think Mazzinho is always the player where I'm like, if Mazzinho's playing well, it probably gives them that little extra edge. But I don't know if he always plays well. I do think he's like in some hard positions, but he can be a bit hit or miss for me. But yeah, overall, just love this team, and the fact that they like went through so many random Mongolian players I've never heard of and still make upgrades is just crazy to me. I love it.
Yeah, for me, this team always felt like they were that close because they actually played a very tactical brand of Asian Counter-Strike. Like they actually weren't reliant on just finding talented players and, putting them in all the best spots and throwing like a million flashes for them. For me, the recent success, I think, is actually like a shift in play style, because I almost feel like there's more trust in the team. Like, I think it was kind of just Blitz and Mara that believed in each other to call a game for them. But since they brought in Senzu, I feel like they've loosened up a lot. Like, they actually don't look as rehearsed in the plays that they're going for. Like, it almost feels like more instinct. Like, this feels like the right thing to do. I'm gonna do it. And then a player goes and finds like a multi-kill, and Blitz is just smiling. I kind of get that impression from the last 2 tournaments they played in the season. That they're almost relinquishing a little bit of control and trusting the players more, because there are many times that the Mongolz made it out of the Asia region where they had egotistical personalities that wouldn't listen and would always overcall or do something out of what they'd practiced. But I think they're understanding that these younger players, all they want to do is play make. And sometimes you have to just give them that ability to do that in an official, so that they can do that more in the future, or you can just stop doing it and people are going to think you're going to do it, and it's like this whole mind game. So for me, I think this Mongolz team is developing. Like, I even think Blitz's calling is maturing in a way where he doesn't actually have to be as controlling as I think he once was in previous rosters.
Yeah, that's a very fair point, because there was a time in this team, I think they had to kind of break themselves to then reform the strict system that started working. Because initially, when they were playing with like Annihilation and Score, back before they were even Mongolz, but I'm talking about Blitz, I'm talking about Mara here. Yeah, they did have a little bit more looseness because those guys were more established, more playmaking forward. And they did kind of like break it down to the fundamentals, build it back up, sign the right players, mold those players to their systems, because those players were like 17-year-olds. And now they're finally reaping all the rewards for it. Like, that's what I think has been so fun to follow. This team could have the best documentary made about them for the last 2 years. Like, in terms of all the tough decisions they've had to make and all the like long grinds they've had to go through with new players. I think it's a really impressive like arc.
I think just you mentioning Score Annihilation, I actually think those were the 2 players that broke out of what was actually a traditionally structured system. When they got to tier 1, they just started making crazy plays, like totally outside of what they would normally do. And, that delivered some cool highlights, but it didn't always win them games. I think that was a partial bit of the problem, is where it's like, oh, we got all this publicity. You guys are sick, but also you didn't listen to the call, so you're out. So, like, that's kind of the impression I get from these guys.
Fair enough. No, I mean, it's a shame to me, actually, that we don't get to see, like, especially Score. I always liked watching Score a lot anymore, because the Huns, the team he's currently on, haven't really had that sort of level of success. But maybe more in the future, we'll get even more Mongolian players somehow. This tiny region will keep producing teams. That'd be really cool to see.
Are we backing them against G2 then, the BO3?
I think if there's an upset to pick, that's one to bet on.
Most logical one, yeah.
Like that and VP Complexity. Who's favorite? Like, we'll have to find out. But let's move on to our second underdogs, because we're over an hour and 15 minutes into this one.
Yeah,
it's gonna be a long episode. So I mean, I'm not sure to say you're welcome to the fans or viewers or not. We'll see. Underdog number 2, Hawka. Who have you gone for?
Okay, listen, guys.
This is gonna be fun.
I had slim pickings. Okay, we were at the bottom of the celebrations box. I didn't want the bounties, which are GG How in this case, because those are the worst. So I went with
bounties are great.
Oh my god, so great! I'm on a podcast with bounty enjoyers. Brilliant, right? Great. No, but I went for Sashi, a team who I know so much about. They're coached by Hunden. That's a good start. I mean, you'll know some of these players. You'll know like Lucky. You'll know Mister. This is like low-key one of the teams where if it all goes wrong for Hooksy or Cadian, they end up on this team basically. Because I don't really know what to say about this team, because like they haven't even been doing that well online. Really, they've been doing all right, I guess. Recently, a bit of a recent rise. Did they have to qualify for this? I haven't even looked that up. I guess maybe they qualified.
They did. They are the European qualifier.
Wow. Okay. Did they actually beat good teams, or like that's
beat Eternal Fire in finals?
Yeah.
Hey, there we go. I'm feeling this pick now. Definitely. I honestly need you guys to jump in, because I basically know very little about this team.
Not gonna beat Cloud9 as well in the same qual. With like,
wow.
I can't remember who they were playing with. Like Alpha. That was it. It was like Perfecto, Boomich. Okay.
Oh, mate, they beat Astralis at Yala Compass as well. Huge results for these boys. Huge.
You're learning so much about them right now. Perfecto, Hobbit, Axile, Boomage, and Alpha. So
wow.
That's who they beat.
It's a roster. It's
they beat them
historically one of the most annoying rosters for me personally, because in online games, they cannot be relied on to truly be one of the best tier 2 teams who are like going to take another step up. Like, I don't think the talent's really that good, but they're always annoying enough to just take wins against the teams you're actually rooting for, to hoping to make it through a qualifier. They just fuck it up and you end up with like Koi qualifying for everything. And you're like, God damn it. And in this case, they actually won the qualifier. Good for them. But also, fuck me, I don't rate players that highly. I do remember a long time ago, like I was talking about prospects, or I tweeted a prospect, and someone was like, Cabby, the next guy, and I was just like, how to respectfully say you're completely wrong, someone, because he's on this team and he has been their best player in the games they win. It's just they're not a consistently like dangerous roster, so I don't really have much positive to say about them. Despite the fact that, they have certain things that work. They got good chemistry, like, they're tactically okay. They just don't have any star power that makes me believe they'll beat MOUZ. And once in the BO1s, well, it might be a complete clown fiesta, but I still don't have much faith in them. So, no, you're right to have not a lot to say about Sashi. I do kind of wish you'd just gone with the bounties, though. I wish you'd talked about GGA just to rub it in. Like, that'd have been amazing.
I was about to say, like, who would you guys have picked? Would you have actually picked GG Hal just for
the bants? I might have.
Yeah. Have they even like played anything? I don't even know.
They had to play a qual.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, but the MENA qual.
It was only MENA, yeah.
Oh, so. And it's like, and Kirby and Issa did actually play in the qual. Okay, I didn't realize they'd been there.
I do love that in this tournament format, they were just like, yeah, we're going to add a MENA qual, but you're not even going to be in like an opening round matchup. You're straight away in the last chance stage. Like,
it's so troll.
I just couldn't believe that. Like, oh, we're going to give you a slot. You have no lives, and you play best of ones if you're going to win.
To be honest,
so funny.
It might work for them. Like,
it might. It's
they
crazy.
Might need that fluke, the craziness of BO1s to just make it through. But this is the worst part of it all. GG How played the qualifier with one roster, right? They actually had Fuzi on their roster and Vital, but they end up signing one of the guys from another team on the qual, Osama's, to be on their team, and bringing in Denislav to AWP. So it's not even the same roster that qualified. They're already playing with Kirby as a stand-in at that point, but he's been locked in now as their IGL. It's something special, man. That'd have been a conversation to have. And instead we had to talk about Sashi. Like, oh, it's 5 Danish guys. They're good at Counter-Strike sometimes. Like, God, it's so boring.
Mate, back at the Asian RMR, they were playing with like Davcost and Elian. What is going on with this team? What are they doing?
GGL's a mess, man.
In the Asia RMR, is it? Yeah, yep. Okay.
Yeah, cool. Mini's really talented though. That's the craziest part. Mini's a talent. I mean, Issa looks fine online against Middle Eastern competition. Shocker. But more importantly, no, this Mini guy's a real talent. It's just hidden by the fact that he's here. Like, Endpoint, sign him. This is your thing. Like, go sign the next Middle Eastern talent. It's Mini. Anyway, Yubi, you need to talk about Sashi. We need to talk about Sashi. That's the pick.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're just okay. I actually have like, I just don't think the players are good enough to get out of this level, and they're just okay. Like, they'll hover around, they'll win a CCT or something, and I don't think they'll ever level up. Like, they're in this position on, what is it, sort of like Masonic, where they're like just good. Yeah, they're just good enough. Like, the players are fine, but I just don't see them having much growth for any of these players, unfortunately. But I'm fine to be wrong. Like, level up, please, Sashi, I guess.
Mate, they've got the Hunden tactics.
Yeah,
the strat,
clearly. The playbook. They've got the strat book, guys.
His oversight will be useful, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll share all the Astralis strategies with them.
Exactly. Boom.
No, but I think it will get a little. It's a little too toxic to say they don't have anything going for them. Like the way I kind of phrased it. Like, they do have like solid team play. And they play good Counter-Strike. That's always going to be the thing with like the quote unquote Danish 5 stack from tier 2. they do have a lot of tactical ideas kind of nailed, and they've all come through and played with a bunch of IGLs or played in academies or just generally had like a good structured approach to their development. So they're not going to play terrible CS. It's just the stars aren't there. And that's always a part of it. The ideas are great until you got to click. If you can't click on the right place, you're just not going to be that good.
FaZe. Did you see, by the way, that Bobsky in an interview said that Astralis only signed Lucky because the guy saw his FACEIT stats and decided to sign him off of his FACEIT stats.
That's not a rare story. I've had conversations like it's an interview I did with Mighty Max about their recruitment of Boros. The FACEIT stats were one of the big things that came up for their GM.
Fair play.
And it kind of has to be when you're signing low-level prospects. Astralis shouldn't be doing this, just a side note. But if you're signing players who are just like free agents no one's ever heard of, the fact that they've played 6,000 maps against the likes of Nico, Bit, and Rigon and has brilliant stats counts for something, right?
Sure.
So I guess in that sense it works. Astralis, though, that was silly. All right, Yumi. Have you got more to say about your own underdog pick?
I don't know. Have I said my second underdog pick? I don't think I have.
Not yet. That's why I'm asking you.
Yeah. No, I've gone with M80. Yeah, sure. They just lost MOUZ. I get it. That's a pretty big signing. But they have picked up Lake, who I won't pretend to know much about, but I've heard people have told me about this guy a fair few times. I think he had I don't know. I think he had good stats on his previous team, Carpe Diem, I think. Yep. And to be honest, I just kind of like the rest of this M80 team. Like Slacks isn't the best AWPer that I would have, but he's fine enough. And I think the calling from Sin is really what's kind of changed my perspective on this team, because I've heard good things about the way that he conducts himself, like his work ethic for it. And I also just think that it wasn't just like MOUZ ripping heads when, M80 were having that surprise. Like the rest of the team played solid enough as well. So I see them as an underdog. That's it. But one that I think can punch up more than people will expect.
Yeah, I think it's not a bad pick. I agree with you. Like Mongolz recently suddenly went crazy with his stats, but before that he wasn't actually like massively standing out on this team. You are right. The interesting one with Sin is, would you if you're G2, maybe Sin would have just been like a better choice, because I rate him, man. I rate Sin quite highly. When I watch this team, I don't know, Sin, he's not only a good fragger on this team, very good fragger for an in-game leader, but he is also the team just looks so competent. Maybe it's more that I'm surprised that an NA team looked actually competent. Maybe that's going into it a bit, because I'm just wow, they're playing camp. Look,
I've internalized my belief that American players just can't be good.
Yeah, but also I will give credit to Swisher. I think is actually the talent out of NA where I'm I could see you being good. I remember the old M80 lineups. It was just so depressing. Swisher would just come to these tournaments, and there would just be 2 players on the team that were clearly not good enough, or maybe even 3. They'd have Wolfie AWPing, and I'd just watch him at Pro League miss every shot and just sit there Jesus Christ, this is just depressing. Whereas now, Slacks, like you said, good enough. I think this team, that they probably are going to put work into this, and it's not unquestionable that they could do something. I don't really know much about the Lake guy, though. That's the only concern.
Yeah, it can be a bit weird for me. So Lake, it was an interesting way that I started hearing about him, because it's a long time ago now. I did a video with Maui where we talked about prospects, and he wanted to talk about, from his perspective, American prospects, North American players. And so I was so if I'm going to be on the show and I need to talk about North American prospects, I need to know who he's going to talk about. So I went and reached out to some guys I know from the NA scene to who are the next people up in NA? And of course, everyone's Jaber. I already knew that name. I was it's cool. Then Lake was the next guy up. And I was okay, I've never heard of this guy. When I put his name into HLTV, I got this British guy and an American. I was who? He's not even got a picture. But no, Lake is honestly a quite talented, aggressive player. So he's the right signing for them to have made. He's not going to be He's not Donk, he's not MOUZ, he's not, I don't think, on that level of talented and just ready to just come in and rip things apart. But he is definitely the best option they had in North America, and a talented player. If Sin is as good as an IGL that he should be calling for G2, he should be making that bigger step up. Maybe he can make this work, because he still has, like, Swisher and Rek are not bad pieces. As far as North American rosters go, they're about as good as you can do without having to go and, like, steal half a wildcards roster. So I think this is still an all-right team. Whether or not this is good enough to take on Vitality, no. Whether or not they'll make it through the best of ones, maybe. Like, you know, you lose to Vitality. It's a shame. You get to play Sashi. Ooh, hello. Winnable game. You then beat Sashi. Who you've got to play next? Maybe it's a tough one. Maybe you've got to play FlyQuest. I'm not saying they're favourites, but I don't think they're as deeply underdogs as, say, a Sashi or a GGHao would be in that sort of matchup. So I do think it's still a solid pick as far as underdogs go. I'm just, it's a big shame that they've lost MOUZ MD. He wasn't, sure, his numbers really started spiking people's interest towards the end, but he's been one of the most mechanically gifted players in that entire, like, region, going back 3 years now. Like, he's been on that climb up. He has been one of the grinders, and he has been, honestly, I think his attitude's been remarkable. If you ever listen to him talk, if you ever, like, interact with him online, you'll realize he is incredibly humble and understands that he needs to get better in certain places, to the point where now he is legitimately being considered for tier 1, even if it is for the wrong spots. So, no, M80, still an interesting story, still making decent signings, so I think I'm rooting for them to make it work.
Yeah, that's the thing I will just add. Like, so well run, this team. Like, they've done exactly what you should do to get an NA team good. You've got to get a European in-game leader. That's the first thing. And then, and probably AWPer or potentially Star Rifler. Like, just the most important positions, make them European, and then try to do whatever you can elsewhere.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, let's wrap this up. I don't know how I got both of these underdogs, but that's cool. I'll take it. Like, I don't think there's a great chance of them scoring many points at this event, but at least they give me the best odds as a gambling man. I like that. I've taken FlyQuest, who almost, not quite, have assembled the Oceanic super team. Like, there's arguably, you know, players like JKS they haven't been able to acquire, but in terms of the talent on this roster, they do have INS or INS, who is, like, kind of considered the best player right now that you could probably have, unless you're really buying into, like, the Netic hype. Liaz has always been one of the best pieces, closest to tier 1 ready, and Vexite's their next big talent. Plus, they also have an AWPer who streaky, but definitely can have his up. So they're all round really solid. Brought back Dexter to finish it off, really establish the IGL. And they've looked better than they ever have before. Like, that's the best way I can put it. Like, at Pro League, the results they were able to pull off is unexpected for them. Like, in the past, I would have expected them to beat Pera and maybe Boss and call it a day, like, as the best Oceanic team. Instead, they've actually gone on, they beat NIP, they beat BetBoom. They did make it a bit of a game against Liquid. I think this is a team that's ready to really start, like, joining that Mongolz conversation almost. Like, not quite, but that's where they should be aiming for next. They've upgraded themselves massively. Obviously, they're still a long shot from being a favourite, but I think the talent's there. They're playing better Counter-Strike than they ever have. This is the right time to start buying their stock.
Yeah, I remember trying to advocate for FlyQuest before, and I think my biggest concern with this team is I need Alistair to chill out. Like, this guy just needs to relax and let rounds develop, pick a spot or pick a play, and not just go wildly swinging, like hard swinging into angles like he seems to do in the Oceanic scene, because you don't get away with that stuff in top level Counter-Strike. And he's maybe the one piece that feels the worst, unfortunately, even though I actually think he can be good. He just needs to pick he just needs better selection effectively on his choices. So I think with a bit of guidance, Alistair and the rest of this squad actually can be a very competitive roster in a way that Australia hasn't had for quite a long time, in my opinion. Like, the big wake up call, I think, for them should have been that they actually didn't make an RMR, enough so that Greyhound had to pull out of the scene because that's the only thing keeping the org afloat. Like, for them, that should have been the moment where they realized they have to be able to adapt and grow as players, because I think they get a little too comfortable making all the RMRs and making it to the major and getting that sticker money. I think a lot of players are fine with just that, and that can't be relied upon. I think.
Yeah, I do agree with you. Alistair has always been the player on this team where whenever they come to an international LAN, I'm just like, I know it's hard to step up as an AWPer, but it's weird. He lands some like crazy random shots sometimes, and I'm like, I don't know how you've landed that shot. And then he will just like, yeah, just be kind of wild in the way he plays, and it's a bit much. Let's put it that way. I think he's the biggest clear weak point of the team, and that's a shame when it's your AWPer, because very important role to begin with. I also love how T, when introducing Dexter, used the word established in-game leader. I know you didn't go for good in-game leader. You didn't go for I love Dexter. You were just like, yeah, he's been about.
Yeah, I'm an honest man. I have my my convictions about IGLs, and I don't think he's a great IGL. But as far as like Australia goes, pretty good. He's comfortable with this team, and he can frag out from his spots, like, historically. Cooked with a deagle, you know? If we're rating deagle players, he's probably one of the better ones of the entire event. But he's an IGL, so I've got to be realistic.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's like, for this level of team, it's like, this is where he should be, to be fair. And Inz is actually very good. Liaz definitely solid. So yeah, it's not impossible. It's just, I don't know, they're a team that don't excite me that much. Like, I don't feel like they're a team that can randomly have like a pop-off win. They kind of feel like a team to me that will play pretty well and then just lose because they're slightly worse.
Well, they should Vexite you, because he is the actual, I think, linchpin to them taking a step up. Because he has historically been touted like for a while now. It's like the next Australian talent. And when he was on smaller teams, he did kind of shine a little brighter. But he struggled, I think, at times with FlyQuest, especially with expectations going internationally. But a couple of times where they have been like shockingly close to those big results, especially that Liquid game and all that Pro League run, Vexite has been big in the big moments and found key moments to just shine, deliver, play make, whatever you want to call it. So I think that's going to be key here as well. If Vexite delivers, all of a sudden you don't have a good rifler, a decent support, and then some questionable pieces. You have two like really high impact riflers, a good support, and if the orb's streaky at the right moment, they're scary. So it's conditional, but they're definitely a threat.
Fair enough.
All right, well, I was going to have a little segment at the end where we talk about GG How as like our final underdog, but we kind of slipped that into Sashi rather than talking about Sashi, which is hilarious, maybe a little insulting, but oh well. I think, GG How have been stuffed by the format, which is goofy as all hell, but one thing I am happy about, this tournament nailed. It's a single elim playoff, and it's not 6 teams for whatever ridiculous reasons. It's 8 teams. They actually took the choice and meant, we'll go full 8 team or we'll just do a 4 team. They didn't do this weird in between thing, which I've never been a fan of. So I can approve that little detail. The rest of it, complete mess, lads. Pull your shit together.
The GG How one is so funny. It's literally like, all right, my little brother, you can come along, but like, I don't really want you here.
You're only allowed to play the losers. Like, I'm not letting you fight any of these winners. No.
Hey, they definitely get the prac rooms, which is just like an analogy for like the not plugged in controller. They just get to be like pretending to play in the background while someone else really does it. Then they get brought out. That's awful. Would have been so bad to just have a second team from the Europe qualifier come through and do a real event.
I know, right? Yeah.
It's kind of insulting, but hey, that's the event. Going to be following it, of course. I think they'll be at reasonable hours. This isn't as far east as like a Chinese event, so it could be fun. A good way to kick off the season, and hopefully Yumi could make up the gap. Well, for him, not for me. I hope he stays in last place, and I'm going to hope the viewers vote for the wrong people. That's always the case, but yeah, thanks for watching. If you made it this far, you're my hero, and we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.